If I can just relay what's happened at Jedburgh Sheriff Court since we started to talk about the massive frauds.
Good.
So I'm recording now, and what we were, the first sheriff was called John Halley, and that is the thing that we talked about, where the cover-up and all the cases that were called when I was at the courtroom were related to Portuguese people that needed translations, and were related to the dental industry where my wife has got our asset stripping business. Yeah, and so when Halley was exposed and I asked for the Freedom of Information request on him, the next sheriff that appeared at the next pre-hearing, who was the one who had already refused me permission to plead not guilty in the assault case. Yeah, and the assault case was precipitated by my wife's writ arriving exactly a year ago last weekend. Yeah, it was coincident, or 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, it was the annual anniversary of me getting blind drunk, and the alleged assault, which I was advised by the only solicitor I've ever met who's prepared to talk to me about my defence in either the marital or the apart from the Melrose and Porteous people that had the conflicts with JP Morgan and Michael Moore's links to the massive frauds out of the Westminster Foundation for Democracy Limited, run by George Soros. Yeah, so that's one company that took me on. As soon as I asked them, is this director, this fraudster, they said yes, and they gave me my money back, which is £250 an hour.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And so the next one they wheel in, because of the fuss that you and me and Greg were making on the illegitimacy of the British monarchy, and that's when they were crashing all the planes and everything was disappearing because of the sonar boy stories that we were telling. Now you got to understand that the law courts and the prosecution service in Scotland are run by, can you guess?
Yeah, the Crown. The
Crown Office, yeah. So when we start defaming them, and it's all over every page on my website, and it's all over the front page of my website, that the monarchy are illegitimate, and all those pictures and all those cover-ups of the stories, and concurrently me and John Paterson are talking about the massive religious fraud and making hour-and-a-half long videos.
Well, I'll tell you quickly, George. I was sickened because the only access I had in Budapest was to CNN. That's all they were showing in the hotel. And every time I walk through the reception, you've got the royal family. You've got Prince William in his helicopter. Then you've got Prince William polishing the machine guns.
And what is Hungary? It's a democracy, or
Prince Charles giving all this, they...
Can I just get through my series of revelations?
Sorry, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I've got very limited battery power, and my charger isn't working. So what they've done, they replaced that sheriff with a man who had been long retired in the borders. He's the one that I linked in the video on the Walter Scott Foundation to the silver arrows and the 5 arrows and the links to the leading law firms in the country, and the massive scandal that is the involvement of the Scottish Freemasons, the Walter Scott Foundation and the Abbotsford Trust in league with the Peelers and Robert Peel in London.
Yep.
Yeah, they are the people that killed the returning troops and had the tanks in Glasgow when the strikers were asking for a decent working wage, after both of those people, all those people in all those armies had fought against Napoleonic threats. That's the working man from Scotland. 88 of them were shot dead or hung, and the crowd that watched that was over 7,000 people. Yeah, and the man with the arrows smiling boldly in an article that also featured David Steele, the criminal in the Fleming family foundations, in all the infrastructure projects in Edinburgh and the building of the 10 times over budget Parliament building. That's Sir David Steele of Akewood. They're friends. Their law court has stayed open. Kev Drummond is now a big hit on YouTube. If you look for him, Jedburgh Sheriff Court, you'll find those videos. Okay? It's a scandal and they know it. He's out of the secret society in Edinburgh called the Speculative Society, where Ewan Brown came from, and Ewan Brown crashed all the big banks in 2008. They are in a state of panic, and everything they do at Jedburgh Law Court is a lie. They took him up. The marital proceedings were held in the same building as they always are. The whole of the law enforcement team were an hour and a half late in coming into the building. My wife came in with them. Yeah, I wrote to them that morning that these are the series of scandals that you have to make yourselves accountable for, and I'll send you the bullet point list and I'll post it with when I publish this video. Okay? So everything that appeared, that they refused to let me talk about the revision of the writ halfway through. Yeah, they've tried to section me, as I've told you before, and I've made videos and I've posted that several places this week. Yeah, they tried to section me because the doctor that tried to section me was trained as a policeman first. Although the person who told me that was a local person too, and you cannot trust anything anybody in the cabal says. But I've got the letters published on my website under the topic of NHS fraud, which is massive, as you know. Yeah. And I told you the other day about the links to the family that are into the pharma frauds with the royals. That's the Ogilvies and the Catholic Church, who are threatened with closure by Michael Ancram because of lack of funds. That's Michael Ancram, the former head of the Tory party that worships here. He knows the carnage I'm creating by revealing the truth that none of the newspapers will. So they're threatening to close one of the 3 border parish churches down. It's absolutely ruthless. And so they sainted one of those family members as cover for it. And then as they pull in all of the new cases to follow on from what I've just heard, they're obfuscations for all of the big names in all of the big stories that we've told. And so the new sheriff, the appointment of Sheriff Peter Paterson with 1 T, is just a cover for your honest input into my campaign. And what we've got now is the massive disclosures that the Romanovs have a middle name of Rothschilds. That's the SARS. Their middle name is Rothschild, and that is the man who asset stripped Hearts Football Club. And the Hearts Football Club story is told on my webpage as well. And the salmon sturgeon links to Sean Connery and David Murray take you right into the cabal in New Zealand. And we talked in that video the other day, you remember us talking about the New Zealand Rothschild Trust based in Auckland. And we talked about Hannah Rothschild and her being an admirer of Peter Mandelson, the criminal, who never ever gave back the £50 million. And like the man who's mentioned in that video that I've just posted, that was made by me and Gordon, you know, they're massive war criminals, they're massive profiteers, and all of them, the law firms that they're associated with, are just fraudsters. Yeah, and we've made explicit videos on that. So can you see the chain of command? Sheriff Halley, Sheriff Drummond, the one that holds the silver arrows up and smiles like a Cheshire cat about his affiliation to the Walter Scott genocidal and murderous regime, and the links to the peelers in London. It's just ruthless. The head of the Borders Council, I think, used to work for BAE Systems Limited, but they've taken that down now. She's been taken off LinkedIn, and she's perpetually unfit for work. And it's just a massive cabal. The man who used to be the head of the council and the employer of my wife's solicitor now, she changed jobs the same month that we came back to Britain. They knew I was coming. I got bummed out of Otago University because I'm the most honest man on the globe, and they know it. And you remember we made that video about the links to the Indiana Jones people, and the Dr. Jones that was my boss at Otago, That is the biggest set of Ponzi's that we've ever described online, and that takes you into Notting Hill and all those places that we've investigated before.
Lord Hyde.
But it also takes you into the Lamonts. You remember how in the recent days we have hit on the Lamonts?
Yeah.
There's a branch of the Lamont family lives in my hometown.
Well, Norman Lamont is the ex-Rothschild's banker.
That's right, he's the Chancellor for our country.
Yep.
But only this week in their home did I learn that John Lamont MSP's relatives, John Lamont gets all the facts on the Cairn frauds from me, but I did not realise that the Rothschilds actually run the Lothian Road Empire. And I've posted a picture on my Facebook page of Sheriff Lothian, who's the gangbang rapist of his own wife. Have I told you that story before?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's just a shallow cover, like the changing of the name of the sheriff at the court and the appointment of that sheriff from a company called Arnott Manderson, which is the joke about the killing of Moira Anderson the year I was born.
Yes.
And is highly likely to be a false flag news item because it occurred the same week that Stephen House got his 100,000 pay risen to 250,000, and he got a knighthood from Her Majesty the Queen within the fortnight, like Ewan Brown, who crashed the banks out of the speculative society in Edinburgh. It is a massive criminal cabal, and I call it a syndicate, because the people that sacked me on the river are lords of our nation, and for 30 years were the negotiators of the British EU fish quotas. Yeah, and that man sacked me for refusing to kill fish during the preservation period on the River Tweed, where he's a member of the Tweed Foundation and its commissioners. And when we reported all of their frauds and their ownership of the river as Englishmen or Welshmen or Irishmen, yeah, or people that have just muscled in on the local, none of the fishings in Scotland are owned by Scottish people. It's just pathetic. Yeah.
The shame of it is, George, is that we know that Scottish voting thing was a scam, and
yeah, you see, but I don't want to talk about that. That's what Jim Fetzer was prepared to dedicate 45 minutes to electoral fraud. It's a crock of shit to cover all of the financial crimes, but the real tragedy is that there is no law enforcement anywhere on the world. It's just the mafia that runs it now, and the people that work in the court are just begging to keep their jobs. Yet because of the greed, there is no money in the public coffers. And I've told you the story about the primary school teachers begging to be given desks and computers at the front of Lord Sains, and this week it's the Red Nose Day scamsters.
Oh God!
Yeah, the whole week they're making fools of themselves. They're tying decent little kids from our local region into that massive fraud, and all of them are massive profiteers at the citizens' expense. You know, they're all in that same cabal with the Chipping Norton people, and you know, every politician in our country is picked for his sins.
Exactly.
And you know, I would have been done for defamation dozens of times already, as would Greg Hallett have been done 12 or 14 years ago when he first started making those books. But none of them have the courage to come forward, and my case is actually documented with actual forensic documents, Gordon's term. Yeah?
Yes.
And so I just wanted you to know that they keep changing the things, and what they're doing is that they're threatening to take half my home away when I owned all of that home before I met my wife. And none of that I'm allowed to talk about in the pre-hearings. I don't even know whether or not that will be heard in, you know, the case, the issues that and the things that they're asking me to do. Only I'm made aware of my commitments when I attend the court. Nobody's prepared to give me a solicitor, and I've applied, and I've all over my website my letters of application for solicitors. The one man who gave me the advice that when I was convicted of assault, and that was it was the niece of my best man. Yeah, I'm not telling you any names because I've got a gagging order for that, and that is quite a logical gagging order. But the request that I got to gag my Freedom of Information request on Sheriff John Halley, the cover for the very insightful Greg Hallett, that is a huge abuse of democratic freedom, along with the fact that my elected politician Michael Moore will not let me meet him, and he has removed all of his transcript as the Secretary of State for Scotland and a full cabinet member for quite a long period of time. Everything that he had on Hansard has been removed. That is how fraudulent this is. It's criminal. It's a breach of the UK Constitution. Have you heard that story before?
Of course.
Michael Moore has nothing on Hansard. Michael Moore, as the Secretary of State for Scotland, is privy to the secrets of the Arms to Iraq inquest. He's privy to the Dunblane inquest, and you know the magnitude of that.
Yep.
That's where the patron of the Dunblane school is Prince Philip. For obvious reasons, and Jimmy Savile is pictured with the Archbishop O'Brien. Archbishop O'Brien is still wandering the streets of Scotland. Nobody's asked him any questions about his career in paedophilia or the alleged corruption in the Catholic Church, and the fact that the Pope at the Catholic Church now gave confession to Videla and was supportive of the regimes that were the genocides of Operation Condor and the Caravan of Death. You can see how lawless our world is.
Well,
so I was a bit nervous about the local gossips telling me that the new sheriff was Paterson, but you can see that the ruthless jokes continue, and he's a dead ringer for the man from Edinburgh who used to play for Broughton, and Broughton secretaries were part of the story I told you the other day. Remember that? And the covers up of all the law firms and the solicitors firms and the accountancy firms by the use of the names that are the Rabsy Nisbet's children. It's childish, it's petty, and it just takes up all of their time, and the only people that get persecuted are the innocents.
The thing is, though, as I said before, George, now that they know, that the public know what their game is, and now they've been taking the piss. Yeah,
they're going to have to slow down, which is why they're doing what they did yesterday morning. Every time I go to court, I write them a letter, and now that they are complicit in the Trident scandal, they are ever so nervous about that.
Of course.
And do you know, every time we investigate anything like the Tweed Foundation, or Miss Patricia Tom, or the Lothian and Borders Police, or Baroness Blackstone, they become non-limited companies. They get rid of the registered companies and they send them out to Europe. That's what my boss at the Welcome did, Trevor Jones. He had massive holdings in Edinburgh. Suddenly they're all over Europe. He's on the rich list still, and he's on the Debrett's list. And all of that is done at the taxpayer's expense because of that polypharmacy thing that I told you about, which is the NHS fraud, which is why the local doctor, because this is a cabal that is designed to silence me. You must understand that now. I've got insight into their political frauds, their war crimes, their director numbers in the NHS, in the profiteering in pharma. You know that story about the fugitive? That is a minor crime compared to what I've taken on, and they know it. And that is why when I wrote to them explaining their complicity in all of those previous issues, that's why the sheriffs bail out. When you're aware of the gang plot or the criminal act in British law, that makes you complicit in it. That was how Stephen Lawrence was convicted all those years after, and his conviction is just a joke about Princess Anne's crimes. And his family live in the Caribbean in luxury. All of them get massive bungs to steal from society and to take away its competence. And the law people are telling me that they're delighted that they've kept all their jobs, and all they have to do is now travel 40 miles or so per day to get to the new workplace, and they persecute the local people there locally. in posh cars, because they charge the local people £250 an hour or more.
Yeah.
And when I was told that my brother-in-law funds the whole of our divorce proceedings, that was when my wife told me that she worked for him. And in that video I've just posted all of his crimes and all of the companies that they use in your area involving my in-laws, a family called the Salters. Yeah? And that is part of the joke about Scotland's flag. The saltire is Scotland's flag. And you must know what the Salters were in conflict.
Yeah, yeah.
When they took over the region, they poisoned the water, salting the water. There's the joke. And the Scottish Parliament building in Gaelic is the parlour maid. Isn't that fucking funny? That you can have freedom and democracy run by the Crown, which is illegitimate for 160 years, and everybody that's in law enforcement dedicates all of their time to covering up the honesty of the people that are prepared to work for nothing, to reveal why our nation is not capable of funding any of its public sector people or giving them any pay rises, even although their union bosses work on the court of the Bank of England. Yeah,
that's just the scum of the earth.
It is a democratic scandal, and they know that they're being exposed, and the reaction to that is not to conciliate and to try and make the place decent, but it's to persecute and potentially kill people. Because Greg Hallett told me so many stories about body doubles, and he told me so many stories about Saddam Hussein and the details of those stories. And when you look at the new guy, his accent sounds authentic, but when you look at the stories about the Queen, you've got a whole spate of actresses that look just like Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II. And what that Greg Hallett interview says is that basically what they do in the media and in YouTube, I've had one of my YouTube videos censored today because it features the beheadings and the disemboweling of William Wallace, but because I've got so much footage of William Wallace and the persecution of the Scottish women, you know, by the invading forces, and that the beheadings that are going to spark World War III are just at the end, they've shut it down after how many weeks? How many weeks ago did you watch it? Yet they know that the body of evidence that you and me and Gordon have got, even although Gordon's is only on that tight fiscal issue.
Well, you see, when I repost that video as a banned video, it's going to get 100 times more views, George. The banned ones always do. I
don't think you'll be able to open it now.
What do you mean?
I don't think you'll be able to open the banned video, will you?
I've got it downloaded. I've got everything downloaded.
I'll just make another one, just showing some stills from my camera. I mean, I own the video of the Braveheart movie. The Braveheart movie. And I'm playing it in my own living room, and I'm taking the... If I scan back, I'm just making a movie on my own telly. You know, it's not a copyright thing. I've bought the product, and I'm making a movie in my own home. But because of the content, you know, it's another crime at the Prime Minister's expense. But as I keep saying, I believe that Cameron is much more pliant than that little bastard Blair. You know, he's cut and run with all of the war dead's proceeds in his bank accounts all over the globe. And, you know, the regime that is pictured on that Facebook picture that I gave you tonight, Hannah Rothschild is a huge admirer of Mandelson and the other guy that was in the spin doctoring sector, and the person who's in charge now of the Company Check website that declares John Smith to be the director of everything we investigate. That's the Lothian and Borders Police, Miss Patricia Tom's non-limited company, that's my wife's solicitor, Baroness Blackstone, the Tweed Foundation, everything that I've investigated, the CEO becomes John Smith for cover-up reasons. And if it was a German company in wartime, it would be Johann Schmidt, and that is openly laughed at in the Hogan's Heroes profiteering from the US war bonds joke. The creator of Hogan's Heroes was Bing Crosby. If you look Bing Crosby and war bonds up, you'll see why Bing Crosby is a legend.
He's a Freemason.
Yeah, absolutely, and he has a laugh at the killing of Princess Grace when they make that movie on the yacht.
Yeah, she was...
And do you understand the Hogan's joke?
What, the Gonculator?
No, the Hogan is...
Okay.
It's a kind of tent for the American Indians.
Yes.
And I think, have I told you the Jonesy joke about Jonesy and Dad's Army?
Go on.
Butcher Jones, you remember him, to get up the fuzzy wuzzies?
Yes.
Butcher Jones was a killer in the American genocides. Look it up, and it's now a park right near the Rockefeller Dam in, I think it's Arkansas. It's well across towards the west coast, well across towards that secret air base that I told you about the other day. Yeah, and isn't that funny that every one of the Dad's Army characters about a genocide that costs something like 80 million lives, every one of them is either a killer, a Freemasonic killer and a planner of the Protocols of Zion. That's Pike. Wilson is Woodrow Wilson, that extended the war by 2 vicious years, and that is about the Princeton sexual coercion that I talked to Jim Fetzer about, and Jim Fetzer confirmed all of that. That's out of Princeton, and we've heard about Yale University in the skulls, we've heard about Oxford, Cambridge, Göttingen and Heidelberg. All of them are immune from risk in World War.
These are Jesuit.
And when the Free French and the Free Polish come across, they move into those regions. I've got all the Free Polish director numbers. They're registered in London still running profiteering schemes out of the war that ended in 1945. And it is fucking tragic. And they see it as really, really funny. And everything that I'm posting online is for my own safety. The doctors tried to have me sectioned in the first half of 2011.
They always try this bullshit, George. They tried it to Phil McConnell, the ex-Marine.
Well, and what they did then, I sent them in response to the request that they attend the surgery with my wife. I sent them an invitation to dinner, and I've posted it online, and I'm still keeping their names a secret because they are decent people. They're just coerced into this by the world leaders, and that is the tragedy of the situation that we are all in. That you and I are decent enough to confront it. Gordon's taking it on, and they're listening to some of the stories, but when you see that the Rothschilds' involvement is so much bigger than anything that Gordon talks about, and that stuff that I told you about the real running of the City of London and the stock exchange there, with all the links to Mario Monti and the European fraudsters, it is an absolute scandal. But there is no law enforcement, so you and me are the only people. And did you get the joke about when I posted the video we made on the massive Rothschilds interlocks? You know, we only investigated 15 companies. That got us into the SARS activities, got us into Auckland. But on the front page of that video, I've put the white helmets that the East Sussex Police and the Isle of Man fraudsters. You should visit the Brighton Secretaries and Brighton Directors Limited.
Well, you see, at the moment, George, I'm still in London. Now, when I get back to Seaford, I'm going to pay a visit to that Brighton Secretaries.
Yeah, make sure you take somebody with you, or several people with you.
Well, we'll see, but I've got ways of doing things, George, that are quite innocent looking. Let's put it that way.
So can you see it? So there are 3 or 4 sheriffs. The first man, who was the Procurator Fiscal, was involved in my assault case. But when they saw that I could see what people were involved in, he was under Angiolini Eilish. I can't mind what his name was. Fraser, I think. So they got rid of him and they put Drummond in. And Drummond refused to allow me to plead not guilty. And the man from Edinburgh called Ross Dow, who said that when they were accusing me of assault, all I was doing was chatting up a woman. And when they refused to reveal that I apologised the following Wednesday, after that Saturday's, you know, that was the day my writ arrived. It's a year ago, 2 weeks back.
Yeah.
And I apologised profusely to my best man. Yeah. He never even relayed the apology to the woman. And the people that were involved in that, what I was trying to talk to them about was the ambulance frauds, about the pay rises that the ambulance man gets. But our boyfriend's an ambulance man from Hoyk. And the man who was sent off in the Scottish Rugby International that day when we got beat 50-0, which was another reason for me getting pissed, because everything has been asset stripped. Yeah, he's an ambulance driver, and all of the crime scene investigations take place after I go. And when they come to report the crime to me and ask me for my version of it, they're unable to find my address, even though I get mail shots from all of them. And from John Lamont MSP addressing it to me, Mr. Lees, at my home address. Instead they went to my dad, who's had several near-death cardiovascular accidents, and they reported it to him. Isn't that clever? Yeah.
Well,
what they're doing is
it's not clever, George, because I've got plans for these people, and I'm not going to spell it out. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just think that all we need to do, and once I'm free of this divorce case, I will be a much more potent person, because it's really, really stressful. You know, I did not sleep a wink on Thursday night, and when I look back at what has happened, and when my wife left me, and the financial neglect that she has left me in, that when I talk to the people at the Citizens Advice Bureau in Galashiels, where Michael Moore and Miss Tom now reside, she told me that nothing that I was describing was grounds for divorce. But if someone was to leave their partner or their bedroom without justification, my wife did that 3.5 years ago, okay, when we started to make videos on fraud. And in that video I've posted tonight, when I was talking to Gordon, she came in and she told him to fuck off.
No.
Yeah, absolutely. And she also, when we had to get the repairman in, he had to come and repair a leaking sink, and she declared, because I asked her to explain how the sink got leaky, she chucked the carving knife into it.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I'm not accusing her of anything. She knows that I know that her family are involved in minor frauds, but they are also involved in the asset stripping of dentistry and the stealing of all of those fees from all of the dental students as leaders of that profession. And that is why his heritable assets, he's gay, he has no children, and he has a house worth over £600,000. His other flat in London was worth over £260,000. Yeah.
Excuse me while I throw up, George.
Well, you see, my wife has my wife had only a car which she did not own. She owed £4,000 on it when I met her. I took her into my home, and now what Law Enforcement UK, in the syndicate that is Rothschild's Global, they're trying to strip me of that. They are going to pay a very, very heavy reputational price.
You can count on
I never give up, and with friends like you, we can get it all outed.
Oh, it's out, George. We're as soon as this video's finished, I've got such a wide outreach now. And
can you start breathing fire on the religious fraud, because you know all the facts now?
The thing with the religious fraud, George, is you're a much better speaker in expressing all this.
Okay, have you heard of...
I'll leave that to you.
Have you heard of Wilson, Betty and Cable?
Wilson, is that a solicitor's firm?
No, it's the fucking piss take about the Egyptian sand dancers.
Oh, this is Tommy Cooper.
Yeah, all those people. Tommy Cooper died in front of HRH because he's taking the piss out of Islam with the red fez on.
Yes.
Well, the Wilson, Betty and Keppel joke is a joke about the theological college at Cambridge. Or it may be at Oxford. I think it's Christ's College, Oxford.
Oxford, yeah.
But if you look up Wilson Keble, and Keble is the name of the man in the Fugitive film.
Yes, of course.
Everything is a cover. And if you read the story about the college where Keble came from, you'll see the links to the England football team that won the World Cup in 1066, not 1966. Both Hurst, Peters, and who was the one who scored the hat-trick? Was that Hurst?
Oh, I couldn't tell you, George.
Several of the names in the college that is the theological college there. It's just massive. Everything they steal from and victimise is a joke for them.
Well, it's all coming back, George. Trust me.
But you see, with all the stuff about Arnold Manderson and the Jedburgh Sheriff Court and all the evidence online, they've now covered up the fact that when you look for Moira Anderson, you get only the two Ronnies taking the piss as Moira and Ken. Yeah, and the Ken joke is the joke about Judaism that is shared by Ken Dodd, and the Diddy men
yes,
are the same joke as the Lady Di joke.
Yep.
Yeah. It's all about the Knesset and the nomenclatures and the festival in the Jewish religion, and the gods are quite angry with me since I've diverted into trivial divorce cases again.
Okay.
But it stresses me more than anything else that I'm being held to account for things that I'm totally innocent of. And when I asked my wife's solicitor in a telephone conversation the other day, all of my speaker phones since we came back to Britain have been broken accidentally. Can you imagine why?
Of course.
Yeah, and it's just a scandal
Yeah.
that we are run by a mafia that does not even understand, outside its marital sector, that the use of the term shelf co all across its website is an absolute denunciation of them as money laundering fraudsters, and they're really proud at Turk and Connell to their links to the Channel Islands and to the where's Bermuda again? What's the island's called? Where did the world champion, who will not come back to Britain unless it's the Olympics, when he gets tax breaks?
Oh, Sean Connery.
No, the 100 metres champion at the Olympics, Jamaican.
Oh, sorry.
That's the West Indies, isn't it? Yeah, and everything is just a cover for the fraudulent world ownership, and the fact that no democracy anywhere on the globe now is allowed to fund its activities from its central bank.
Yeah.
And that issue is simple enough for everybody that I've talked to this weekend to understand. I had enlightening, when my wife was plotting with the law team at Jedburgh for that whole hour and a half, I talked to folk from shelter. 40% of the returning troops in Scotland are returning troops. Sorry, the homeless are returning troops.
40% of the homeless are returning troops.
And what the other cases,
40%.
what the other cases were, is the conviction of people who cannot pay their rent to housing associations that are millions and millions, they're hundreds of millions of pounds in debt themselves, and they have that massive toxic debt pool with immunity from prosecution or even token investigation. But when a tenant goes £200 under, the repo man comes in and takes the stuff to the pawn shop.
George, I want these people to understand that they may be immune from prosecution, but they're not immune from justice, if you follow my drift.
Well, they are, because the whole world's run this way, and the other countries, other countries get it much worse than us. If you're in the Holy Lands or anywhere in Pakistan, you know, or India, I've been to India. Take my word for it, it is a disgrace. And the Christian missions are all over all of those places, sucking up all of their assets, and all of their, you know, all of our steel magnets come from India. And the word steel is really appropriate.
Yeah.
And all of them are in the House of Lords, lording it up with all of these other petty thieves who are prepared to kill anybody to keep their power base. and that is how the world is run. I'm going to stop there, because thank you for your time. I just wanted to get it off my chest, and I know that you can get it more public than I can really quickly.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but my wife is a decent person. My wife is easily led, and they used to share a joke with me when I first met them. They took me to a place called Chipping Norton, and they showed me the Rollright stones, and a man from Chipping Norton, yeah, that's her and her brother, who's Asset Strip Dentistry and runs World Dental Press and all the scams that Gordon talks about in that video I posted this evening. He also talks about Mrs. Thatcher and the killing of Andrea Arridge, Mrs. Arridge at the back, and Jonathan Aitken coming to call. Yeah, the Cahills that denounced you and me are a pivotal part of that story. You should listen to it. You could hit on that little Cahill shill.
I already have done several times.
Well, he's only got 250 hits. Mine's has got almost 1,000 for the Fetzer interview now. And they now know what they're complicit in. There's a Cahill on the board of Manpower that employed my wife when Wellcome got into insolvency proceedings. Yeah. There's a Cahill who's the advisor. He's a director on the Red Nose Day fraudsters. He's an advisor to British Air. He's a director at British Airways. There are no directors on the company check site for British Airways.
Gordon was exposing the Cahills at Trafalgar Square.
Yeah.
You've seen that video, George.
And the Cahill joke, you understand that already?
Yeah.
Calvary Hill, where Jesus was crucified.
Yeah.
And most of them are Irish. And most of the profiteers that are advised are Irish. Michael Moore is Irish.
Yeah.
And when you see the films in legend proclaiming that Braveheart has mates from Ireland that are actually talking to God, yeah, you remember that scene?
Yes.
It's my fucking island.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's my fucking island. Yeah, and all of that is a joke. Even the jokes about Ostia in the Gladiator film, the Irishman, the Irish accent, is the man with the scar on his face.
Yes.
And all of that is totally turned upside down, and everything that happens in the Mithraeum is a plot between the world's elites and the fascists who like to have an orgy. They've got a sense of humour.
Yeah.
And I listen a lot to Oasis now about the don't look back in anger.
Yes, that's
because
right.
all of them are living a life of opulence, and they get the bunny girls as part of the sector. The Harris family that sacked me on the river, because they're friends of the Rothschilds and they're immediate neighbours. Yeah, that's the Rolf Harris covers. You must get that one already.
Yes.
That house used to be owned by Victor Lowndes and the Bunny Girls.
Yes.
And right next door to my brother-in-law, in Lower Swell, right next door to Chipping Norton, there were 2 Bunny Girls in residence. And they all think it is really funny to persecute our country this way, but they're in for a huge fall. Because as you know, God is on my side. And that is going to be the thing that breaks the camel's back.
Definitely.
If we need him. But if your friends can get chatting to us like this and start exposing their local criminals all over the world through that Able Danger movement, then we can really make a fist of it.
Oh, you better believe it.
And that is not the fist that was used to fuck Helen Clark up the rear before she stole the $2 million from the NATO Development Fund, the UN Development Fund.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's actually a fist of the ordinary working people who are the innocents of our country, who occupy the army uniforms and get culled relentlessly as part of the joke. And it is just for the elites a joke, but now that they know they are outed, they are really panicky.
Well, I'm starting to get angry now, George. I've got plans for this video, you trust me.
But when you learn from Greg Hallett that the man who was the body double for the war criminal went to attend his own war crimes hearing and saw the body double get executed, the mind control centres at Tavistock and those moronic people that cover up the killing of JFK, that was Beaverbrook and Churchill. Exactly. They're the owners of the whole world at that time. But you dare not get an American president like FDR, who died really young. He was a polio victim. which is why Bill Gates is interested in polio in Africa. It's just everything is a stitch up, and every time we talk I reveal new truths for you, and thank you for getting them out, because even if, you know, the people that are involved, I always get nervous about the people that are on Skype with me, except you, because I seem to find you spontaneously, and it's, you know, that it's just really important that the magnitude of the financial crimes gets out, because everybody could be prosperous and happy for the whole of their lives all around the world. And when you get prosperous in a family group, the birth rate goes down. Look at the data. Look at the data from Hans Rosling and Gapminder. So when you get socio-economic welfare, which is what the Freemasons said we had in Ireland before I left Dunedin, that's Frank Griffin, the Freemasonic boss in the biochemistry department, where Professor Lamont works. Yeah, that's why they're talking to me. They realise that I understand that the Dean's family in Scotland, in Musselburgh, died really young. That's her parents. Yeah, her husband was a Burns Club fan. The Burns Club mythology and the wee timorous Cooran beastie is now the ordinary working man who gets robbed of everything that he has worked for all of his life. Even if you're a six-figure earning professor with a brain like mine, I'm not giving up half of my home readily. The hunger strike is the next option, and I need you to publish that way in advance.
Yeah, no problem, sure.
If they have any guilt to pin on me, I very much doubt that they will be able to do that. But my wife's solicitor has explained that the divorce threshold for divorce in Scotland has dropped to just, if you don't like living with someone, then you can walk out and walk away with half of the take, despite the illegitimate Christian oath and the marital pledge. There is no need to bring forward any evidence that might save your marriage, because it's a stitch up.
Of course.
And all of it is online, and all of it is online in parallel with the healthcare frauds and the running of the local councils for whom my wife's solicitor used to work, and all of the little care home scandals that all of those people that used to have decent pay rises and massive pensions are depriving the current regime of. That's public sector pay freeze for 6 years back to back, and still I started my campaign. They got 1% at the Scottish Borders Council last year. When the new boss Tracy Logan got her job as the former head of HR at the Scottish Borders Council, she doubled her salary in one step. The councillor that was the chair of the selection committee and rejected me in my application as a full professor and a fraud expert, yeah, I was rejected way before the interview stage. The councillor who was in charge of the selection panel is one of the 3 councillors here in Kelso. They have imposed a gagging order on me for any communications with the council or on posting on their Facebook page, because I know all about their trickle-down issues and all of their links into the Rothschilds and the corrupted law firms and the corrupted healthcare sector. And the police are just puppets.
Of course.
They're registered with John Smith as their CEO, like Miss Tom, my wife's solicitor. And that name, Miss Tom, is going to become really famous, because the boss at the central bank in Britain is a fraudster, and his salary is $800,000 a year. And we've talked already about Mervyn King's presence on the Rothschilds directorates.
Yeah.
And we will not let the citizens forget that that is a huge abuse of democracy. Like everything they do, the whole of our society is a fraud, and it is shameful. I'm going to stop.
Okay, George.
Is that good and snappy? I haven't got any images. Could you teach me how to put images into the YouTube video as it proceeds to play?
Yes. Shall we?
No, in another call, because this is already 52 minutes long.
Sure, okay, George, that's no problem. You see, yeah, okay, we can sort that. Yep, sure.
thanks for your help, and you know, if you can find anybody else with exotic names, they could get a job in the sheriffdom at Jedburgh. Yeah, any name will do, as long as you're prepared to cover up the truth and the jokes about the war dead and the religious martyrs. Bye bye, John.
Cheers, George.
Cheers, bud.